Andromeda Yelton to you today. Andromeda teaches librarians to code. She's taught Python through the American Library Association in the US and Mozilla Foundation in Canada. She's an independent web developer, primarily working in Django, and a director at large for LITA, the Library Information Technology Association. Now, I'm really interested. I looked up something about Andromeda on her website, and I'm really excited that she was a math major and a middle school Latin teacher at one point in her life. Because guess what? I wasn't real confident with my maths in high school. I got there, but I wasn't real confident. And Latin, I loved it, but yeah. I think I still remember paro, paras, parat. Anyhow, welcome Andromeda, and I look forward to hearing your talk today.
Thank you. Hi everyone. It's still the past where I am. I'm very excited that you already know more about the future than I do, because it's the night before here. Anyway, I'm going to share my screen. Ellen, I can't, of course, tell if it's coming through on your end. So if it's not, please send up some sort of panic flag, just in case. Yeah, let me share this. It's going to be difficult to show you only the slides without showing you the everything, unfortunately, because of the way that Mac handles Keynote. So I will try to make it as big as possible and talk over it.
Okay.
Ellen, can you see that okay on your end?
Yep, it's really good. Just so you know, if you could mute your microphone a little bit. I can't mute you at this end a little bit. You're kind of coming out a little bit squeaky at our end, that's all. So just, if it could be done a little fraction, that would be brilliant.
Probably. Unfortunately, my headphones broke a couple of days ago.
Okay, that's all good. That's fabulous. That's great volume. Well, yeah.
Okay.
I'll just mute.
Okay. Anyway, so let me find my screen that I'm sharing so that I can talk to you about that. Anyway, so I'm going to talk to you today about strange new alchemies. I say on my website that I am interested in people, technology, information, and how they intersect in strange new alchemies. And for me, that's really the point of learning how to code and of seeing what libraries have done with code. It's the new ways it gives you of doing things and seeing the world. So I want to tell you a bit about where I'm coming from, both literally and metaphorically. This is within about a mile of my house. It is an American Revolution era fort where the gunpowder was stored. And when Paul Revere was warning everyone the British were coming, this was one of the actual things he was trying to safeguard. Also within a couple of miles of me is MIT. This is the Stata Center, which was not actually a building dropped from a great height, much as it looks like one. But this is, one of the great science and technology research universities of the world, and the hub of an enormous software and biotech industry. So I'm coming from a place that is literally very much about the old and the new, history and technology. And I think metaphorically I'm coming from that place too. When I think about code in libraries, I'm very much thinking about how can code enable us to do new things that take our historic values in a better direction? But also, how can code let us do other things or old things in ways that are more efficient and free us to be better at doing the things that only the humans can do? So things that librarians who code can do include saving money for their institution, delivering better service, negotiating more effectively with vendors, building the kinds of services they want to deliver, regardless of whether someone else has built those services for them, and quite frankly, changing the world. There's a catch, however. It takes time to learn these skills. It takes time and effort and support, and libraries don't get to realize the benefit of having librarians who have these skills unless they're willing to invest some time and possibly some money in training. There's a pernicious thing throughout the tech world where people are all supposed to teach themselves technology on their own time, which presumes that they have infinite time, right? They don't have caregiving responsibilities or illnesses that are sapping their time. And it's just fundamentally unfair, right? If people want these skills at their institutions, they're going to need to invest in making them happen and recognize that they need to happen within the context of the workday. So I'm going to give you a bunch of specific examples now of ways that librarians have used their coding skills to improve their library services or their library work experience. And then examples of how you can learn or support learners at your institution. So, first example, kid wanders up, wondering if you have any books about Dora the Explorer or princesses or rainbow fairies. I think that's what my kid was obsessed with at that age. I don't know if the rainbow fairy poison has infected Australia, but there's infinitely many of them and they're all the same. And she loved them when she was about 5. So at Tulare County Public Library in California, Mike Drake, the deputy director of that library, was facing the problem that it was difficult and time-consuming for children's librarians to find books for kids when they came up saying, do you have a Dora book? Do you have a princess book? Because these books might be shelved in any number of parts of the library. They might be in juvenile fiction or easy readers or picture books. They might be shelved by author or by series, and series might have multiple authors. And furthermore, their OPAC didn't make it easy to search. You had to look item by item, one at a time, to see which ones were actually available in the library right now, which is of course what the kid really cares about, like what can I walk out with today? And then you had to check to see where in the library they were and go on this wild goose chase all over the place. And meanwhile, this kid is getting very impatient at you. So he wrote a script that automatically just looked at all of the different possible results, filtered it to the ones that were available in the library right now, and spat out a list for the librarians of where do you need to look to find books that this kid can get their hands on within the next few minutes. And I love this example, not just because it has children's librarianship, and most librarians I know who code are not in children's librarianship, and I wish there were more, but also because it's about code, but it's really about user experience, right? It's about using code to make the library a less frustrating place for little kids, right? Kids don't have a ton of patience, and they don't want to sit there watching you struggle with your OPAC. They want to get a book and read it. And this makes it easier for librarians to meet that need. All right, so that's an example. I'll hand you another example. This one also from a public library, Westlake Porter Public Library in Westlake, Ohio. And this is courtesy of Matt Weaver, who is a systems librarian there. And he said that they purchased a digital signage system for their library, but it didn't really do what they wanted. And it was not actually manageable for them to use it, because what they had to do was anytime they wanted that to change, someone had to go sit down at the computer at that minute and change it. So if you wanted the signage to display your upcoming events throughout the day as they changed, you'd have to have someone go babysit the sign hourly, which just wasn't going to happen. So they had this expensive object that they couldn't use that was making people feel bitter. And what he did was he wrote a script that lets people edit a simple text file, and then the script would just pull from the text file at the appropriate times and display the events throughout the day. So you could queue up as many as you wanted, and nobody would have to be sitting there babysitting the script all day. And one of the things he said is the code rescued a rather expensive and unpopular project, which is an example that speaks to me in particular because it shows that there's a political dimension to the work people do with code. Writing programs isn't just something that affects the servers, it's something that affects how people relate to their organizations. And it enables people to have more functional political contexts if it's solving a real problem with how people are relating to their organization. Speaking of politics, let's talk about the data dashboard at the Darien Public Library in Darien, Connecticut. The problem that this was solving is that libraries have a ton of data. You're all sitting on an enormous amount of data about how people are using the library. But it's extremely difficult in many cases to collate that data or to monitor it in real time or to make it actionable. So Darien had information about self-checkouts, and returns. What are people checking out? What are people returning? Which items are out right now? How many are out right now? They have Google Analytics from their website. They have data from their Facebook and their Twitter and their mailing list software. But actually going through all that data and collecting it took forever. Right? It wasn't something that they did because it took so long. And so John Bleiberg, who's the director of innovation there, I believe, wrote a series of scripts really that pulls data from all of these different sources and puts it into a common format with a common interface. So then you can staple a website on top of it that's querying all of your data sources and spitting out pretty graphs like this one. And so now he can see in real time how active is the library. And I'm not sure quite how big the text is for you, but what you're hopefully seeing on this slide is he's got hourly, every hour the library is open, 6 a.m. to 7 a.m., 7 a.m. to 8 a.m., all of that, information on how many items have been renewed, how many have been checked out. There's a graph circulation per hour, so you can see like when are you really going to need to staff up that circ desk and when don't you. There's counts at the bottom of how many books and DVDs and audiobooks are checked out right now. And then there's graphs that show sort of how active is the library today compared to its historical averages. So again, this is really actionable information. This is not just cool looking, although it is cool looking, and they've got a giant dashboard like this in the main area of their library, sort of near the entrance, and you can sort of stare at it hypnotically. But it's also really useful for the leadership in terms of figuring out, when are we going to need to staff these desks and sort of everyday questions. And John said of this, it enabled us to gather metrics data in 3 seconds, where it used to take about an hour and a half. So with what I was saying before about I like code because it lets humans do human things better. Instead of spending an hour and a half gathering metrics and then maybe or maybe not having time to do with it, have the computer spend 3 seconds on that task. Now you have an hour and a half to be thoughtful about that and insightful and creative and ask questions of the data that the computer can't. Speaking of metrics, there's a world of possibilities for libraries in terms of open source software and hardware. Libraries have written a fair amount of interesting open source software, and libraries are starting to look into the possibilities of open source hardware. I'm going to talk about a project that I am most familiar with in this space because I am one of the developers, which is the Measure the Future project. This is Jason Griffey's project, and I gather some of you might know him because I know he's spoken in Sydney before. And what we're doing is basically measuring space usage in libraries using cheap open source hardware and open source software. Because for many libraries, their greatest and most unique asset is actually their building. It's a big thing that differentiates libraries from all of the other places people can get books, right? Is you have a place that people can go. But we don't necessarily know how people use that space, where people like to be in that space, how people like to rearrange furniture in that space, any of that. When do they congregate? When do they leave each other alone? So what we're doing is we're using cheap computing power and cheap cameras, so you can get a bunch of them and put them throughout your library, and basically taking images of the space and then using that to analyze when were people there and which bits of it did they interact with. Because we're librarians and we care deeply about privacy, we avoid ever knowing who those people are. The video is really low resolution, and once we've extracted information about where people go, we actually discard the video. So literally all we have is a series of data points about sort of X, Y coordinates within a space and timestamps. And once people exit that space, if they come back in, we don't have any way of knowing if it's the same person or a different person. So we have no way of tracking individual patrons because we really don't want to do that. But what we can do is tell you where people are in a space, which bits of it are popular. You know, if you've put up a book display, which parts of that book display do people actually interact with and which don't they? You can tell from your ILS what they check out, but you can't tell what they touch. You can't tell what they find intriguing and stand in front of for a long time. So we are working on letting libraries ask and answer questions of that nature. And all of this code, you can see where we're at so far. It's not done yet, but it's almost at the point where we can test it in real libraries. And you can get that via measurethefuture.net or follow it on Twitter to learn more. All right, moving sort of steadily from sort of more patron-facing to less patron-facing parts of the library because staff needs matter too. Let's talk about staff workflows and how they are impacted by code. A large fraction of the people I encounter in my coding workshops are catalogers, because although coding skills are relevant throughout the library, catalogers are dealing with the most data, and they are dealing with the most data editing, and they run up fastest against the ways that being able to automate the process of creating and editing records would really make their lives easier and let them do faster work, do more consistent work, do higher quality work. And I know that this is a reference-oriented audience, so I want to make sure to emphasize that these are, you know, catalogers in my classes, but it's work that's relevant everywhere, right? Because the ability to have accurate and comprehensive metadata really affects your ability to answer reference questions and to tell if the materials you're looking at actually answer a patron's need. So what sorts of things can coding do for cataloger productivity and accuracy? Well, one of the people I interviewed for my library technology report, which I will go over later, said, as my department's then only regular user of OML scripts, I had several times the cataloging productivity of any other cataloger in that department, even while spending a smaller percentage of my time on cataloging. So that's a lot of impact for her. She says then only regular user because, of course, everyone else noticed how much she was able to do and jumped on that bandwagon. This is Carrie Preston at the Ohio University Libraries. And for those of you interested in metrizing, well, like, how much productivity are we talking? Becky Yos, who is now at Seattle Public, but at the time of the work I'm about to talk about, I think was at either Grinnell University or Miami University of Ohio. she had a patron-driven acquisition system. And so it spat out records of books that needed to be acquired, and then that had to be processed into the catalog, right? So they needed to pull down MARC records for all of the books they were going to acquire. They needed to edit those according to local cataloging rules, and they needed to add some codes that made their ILS's purchasing module automatically acquire those things so that they could have an end-to-end workflow where the books got acquired and they were properly cataloged so users could actually find them. And before she scripted this process, it took 50 to 100 minutes per week of cataloger time for her library to process the backlog of patron-driven acquisition and make sure all that stuff got where users could see it. And after she scripted it, the entire process took 2 minutes per week. So that's 1 to 2 person weeks of time saved every single year. And again, time that can be used on better things than tedious and repetitive tasks, and time that can be used on things that computers can't do and only humans can. You know, you can use that time for original cataloging of things that are unique to your collection that can't otherwise get out in front of the world. You don't need to spend that sort of copying and making small changes to records that you can have a computer do for you. So I've talked about ways that code can improve patrons' experience and save time, which is similar to saving money. I've talked about ways that it can improve the staff workflow situation, but I promised you that I would also talk about ways that librarians' coding can change the world. So what was that about changing the world? Well, you've probably all heard about the Panama Papers because they were all over the news, all over the world recently. But just in case, the Panama Papers were a leak of 11.5 million documents from a Panamanian law firm. And these 11.5 million documents were pertaining to various offshore accounts, sort of tax havens, where politicians and celebrities from all over the world were storing their money, sometimes legally, sometimes not. And these 11.5 million documents cover hundreds of thousands of companies and individuals. And the team that was working on them was over 370 reporters from 80 different countries. And the effect that this has had, exposing the sometimes criminality and sometimes just maybe hiding and lack of transparency of all of these politicians and celebrities and so forth, has had gigantic impact on the actual political scene. There have been protests in a number of countries. The Icelandic prime minister has resigned. A Spanish government minister resigned. Multiple governments are looking to change their rules or their disclosure practices around offshore accounts. And you can explore the data yourself if you want right now at icij.org, ICIJ for the International Coalition, I think, of Investigative Journalists. They've got this really cool front end where you can sort of look at different key figures and you can see like a social network graph of who they're connected to, and you can explore what they're doing. So how do you make that out of 11.5 million documents, right? That's just a staggering quantity of information. How do you make that much data usable? How do you make it into a thing that you can actually use to answer reference questions? And not just like a stack of inert documents. How do you make it into a thing that hundreds of reporters and the general public can interrogate to get answers to their questions? And the answer to that is Project Blacklight, which is an open source project that was written by librarians to solve library problems. Blacklight happened about a decade ago because Google and Amazon were happening in a big way. And it was becoming more and more and more obvious that library catalogs just didn't have the kinds of features that people increasingly expected their web interfaces to have. They didn't have faceted searching. They didn't have relevance ranking. They didn't have stemming, where you can look at, say, the present tense and past tense forms of a verb. The user might enter one, but you might want to consider all of them because you don't know which form the book is actually going to be in, and you don't want to exclude an item just because they said, you know, walk instead of walked, and then that's what's in the text. They didn't have spell check. They didn't have support for numerous different character sets, right? So that's fine if you're an English speaker looking for English resources, but that's terrible if you speak a language that isn't any other character set. So Bethany Nowitzki and Beth Sadler and Eric Hatcher, who at the time were at the University of Virginia, put together Blacklight as an interface on top of Solr, which is another open source project that lets you index big quantities of data. So Solr ingests the data and figures out something about how to organize it on the back end, but then Blacklight figures out how do you organize it for users? How do you make it so that users can explore their library search queries and make sense of them? And Mark Cabra, the head of data and research for ICIJ, said, we chose Solr because Project Blacklight existed. It's an interface that's intuitive and easy to use. So in fact, an open source project written by a group of librarians to solve library data issues changed the world. And I think that's pretty great. So if you want to learn some things about coding, or if you want to support staff at your library who want to learn some things about coding, where do you start? People always ask me that. And I wish I could give you like a one-size-fits-all formula, but I can't because different people have different needs. However, in having talked to a large number of people who have learned to code, the same things came up over and over again, which is basically what learners need is projects and mentors. They need some sort of real world or at least fun and interesting project that they can try to make it work, because trying to make something work will guide you in terms of what do you need to learn next. And because having a project you care about will help keep you motivated when you get stuck. Because you will get stuck sometimes. Learning how to code is hard, just like it's like learning a foreign language, and sometimes that's difficult and frustrating. So you need motivation to keep going through the tough parts, and having a project helps. Having mentors also helps with that, partly because we are social beings and having that sort of social support is useful, and partly because it's great to have someone you can ask questions of. Ideally, there are mentors in your institution, or at least in your community. But there's lots of active communities all over the internet for people who are learning to code, including librarians, and for people who already know how but are interested in helping new people come in. So if you are looking to start learning, I would say seek out projects and seek out mentors. Options for learning. MOOCs come up a lot, and I've crossed them out here because MOOCs are terrible for almost all people. MOOCs have this implicit theory of like the perfectly self-motivated learner who has absolutely no difficulties with learning or with the logistics around learning, like being able to carve out free time. MOOCs are for people who learn completely on their own with no like social interaction. There are people who learn things from MOOCs, but most people don't. The crash and burn rate on them is really, really high. So I can't recommend those unless you're actually maybe doing them together with a study group that can help you get through some of the psychological and practical difficulties. O'Reilly books. O'Reilly is a publisher of tech books that is instantly recognizable by the pointillist animal pictures on its cover, and it's reliably really, really good. There is an Intro to X O'Reilly book for any technological thing you can think of. And it's typically just well-written, well-edited, thoughtful, useful. O'Reilly has an ebook service, Safari, that is available via subscription. If your library has a Safari subscription, and I know that they do sell in Australia as well, so it might, I totally encourage you to check that out because there's just a ton of great resources in there. Safari actually also includes video tutorials as well as books. Boot camps. Boot camps are kind of a maybe. There's more and more boot camps for various kinds of languages. A number of languages have specifically woman-oriented boot camps as sort of a way to reach out to a group that's been historically, unfortunately, underrepresented in programming. And then there's a number of just general audience boot camps, and Ruby does some good ones, and Python does some good ones, and they can be great for meeting people in your local area and for creating a sense of energy and enthusiasm around coding. But they're typically much too short. A lot of boot camps are like 2 days long. And like I said earlier, learning to code is like learning a foreign language. And if you imagine how much, French or Chinese you would learn if you sat down for 2 days to learn it, it wouldn't be very much. And it would be hard to remember afterward because it would be such a fire hose. So I have a question mark with boot camps because I think they're a great component of learning how to code, but I don't think they're usually sufficient on their own. Courses. Many librarians really like the structure that comes along with a course, having a curriculum and deadlines. And if that works and they're accessible to you, that's great. If you work at like a university that lets you take courses for free or for cheap, that's great. The assignments in those classes are often not super relevant to libraries. It will be kind of on you to figure out how to apply that knowledge to libraries. But they do tend to cover, all of the basics in a really structured way. And that's handy. And that's how I got my start. Although it was a long time ago, I had one required programming class in college in a programming language I did not like and never use. But it meant that when I started programming in other things, 15 years later, I didn't have to teach myself the basic concepts. Like I knew the basic concepts, even though the language was different and the use cases were different. I understood the vocabulary and sort of the lay of the land. And then local user groups. If you look at meetup.com, there's, and I checked, this works in Australia too, as well as it works in the US. There's a ton of local user groups for any sort of programming language or technology you can name. So like if you want to learn Python, if you want to learn Linux, the operating system, you search for like Python meetup groups or Linux user groups or something near you. There probably is one. And that can be a great way to find a source of people who can answer your questions, right? The Python meetup group near me actually has a table for beginners, which is fantastic, right? It means there's a place you can go and not really know what you're doing and not have to feel weird about that because there are other people who don't know what they're doing. And there are experts who actually want to help you. So that can be really useful, but I also encourage you to sort of vet your meetup groups thoughtfully. Some of them are great and are full of super welcoming people. Some of them can be pretty hostile to beginners or new people or like people who aren't young white men. So, figure out which one you're dealing with and find the nice ones. I know there are some. I've actually heard really good things about LinuxConf in Australia. So like, I know there are nice ones, but you may have to look around. Okay, learning options. One other learning option that I must tell you about because I wrote it is coding for librarians, learning by example. This is an American Library Association library technology report. You can download it for free via that first link. It came out like April of last year, so look for my name or scroll back a bit. But you can download it for free. And the research for that is the source of all of the examples I have given you today. Because what I did is I went out and I looked for librarians who code, not librarians whose job is developer, but just librarians who know enough coding that they're able to do things that make their lives easier. And I interviewed dozens of them. And I wrote up examples. So some of these examples are in the book. Some of these did not make it in the book. So you got like a special like behind the scenes look that you wouldn't see reading the book. But it's full of specific examples of code that libraries or librarians have written. And then there's that companion website I list under it that actually has links to all of the scripts I mentioned in the book that are publicly available. So you can see how they did it. You can take how they did it and try to make it work for you, because copying and pasting is actually like the most awesome code learning technique ever. My daughter does this. She does Scratch. She's 9, and Scratch is this great programming language for kids out of MIT, and it's got a remix button. So every time she finds a cool project, she remixes it. She changes like 3 things and makes it her own. And along the way, she learns an essentially infinite amount about programming. So don't feel bad about copy pasting code and maybe changing a couple of things. That is an entirely legitimate way to learn. And even if you never actually get past that stage to like writing your own programs from scratch, you can still do a phenomenal amount. So please look at what other people have done and steal it liberally, because there's no need for us all to reinvent the wheel. We should help each other. I also go into more depth in this book about learning strategies and about ways that management can support people in their libraries who want to learn. Yeah, so there's a ton of stuff in there. Please read it. You can download it for free. And then support. I have been mentioning learning support. So if you are a manager of librarians who'd like to learn to code, what do they need? Money is useful if you've got it. Not everyone has a professional development budget. But if you do, things that you could put it to include travel. Send people to coding related conferences, whether or not they're library related. Subscriptions to online things like Safari ebooks. I'm not sure if lynda.com and treehouse.com are available where you are, but if they are, I hear really good things about both of them. But there's a lot of sort of database licensed resource type things that have good ways for people to learn. Or honestly, just books. Like buy them those O'Reilly books I mentioned. You can spend like $30 and get someone a really good book. So it doesn't have to be expensive to support people in learning how to code. Time, however, you do need more of, because coding is not really a thing you can learn effectively by spending, 5 or 10 minutes a day. And it's not really a thing you can learn effectively by going to work and working a full day and going home and doing your chores and putting the kid in bed and now it's 9 and you're gonna learn something. No. Just no. If you want to help librarians learn to code, you're going to need to allocate some time at work, and some of that time is going to have to be like extended, uninterrupted chunks of time. It's very hard for me to do any coding work in less than like 90 minutes. If I have a block of time on my calendar that's only an hour, I often just don't even try to write code in that block because I know I'm not going to be able to get enough done. So uninterrupted time is a hugely valuable gift. And then collaboration, lots of that too, right? One person learning to code is often very lonely and it's easy to give up if you get stuck. But 2 people learning to code, now they're like friends or comrades in arms or something. Having a brown bag lunch series kind of thing where people get together once a week or once a month and they're all working through an online course together. That's something that a number of places have done. I know University of Maryland did that. And now it's professional development that you share and that connects you to your colleagues. George Washington University actually did a really cool example of that, where they had developers and catalogers working through some code-related stuff in the same room. And they were really helping each other, because the catalogers didn't know about coding, but the coders didn't know about metadata. And so working on metadata-related code problems, they got to learn each other's expertise and see each other in new lights, and they both got to learn, and they both got to teach and cross-train, and it's like full of warm, fuzzy feelings. So finding groups of people who want to learn and who can carve out time to be together and work on things together is really great. Coding is actually profoundly emotional and profoundly social in a lot of ways, even though it doesn't have that image. So yeah, let people be friends. And what is the upshot of all of this? Just to recap, the upshot of all of this is that having librarians in your library who learn to code is great, because then you have your own personal robot army that gets to do all the boring, repetitive, data-oriented things that you don't want to do, and that frees you up to do creative things and social things that are a hugely important part of your library services that the computer can't do. Your robot army lets you be better at doing human things, so build it. And then go answer awesome reference questions and smile at your patrons, knowing that you have great metadata and great interfaces to support you. Any questions?
If people have questions for Andromeda, it'd be good to come up and actually use the microphone and the video so that she can see you. And if you can say your name, please. And you can't all be shy, come on. You'll need to come up the front.
Yay! People actually asking questions, fantastic.
And maybe if other people who are going to ask questions could come up to the front too. Or are you also shell-shocked? Just up the end. You ask questions. So if you just kind of come down here so Andromeda can see you.
Yeah, I see there's a giant microphone like just to the left of my screen. Hi, now you're in the middle of my screen. It's great. Hi.
It's the stand.
So if you can talk to Andromeda, that would be really good. Okay. Yeah.
Well, I wanted to ask you, have you ever heard of the Library Freedom Project and
Yes.
integrating the Python classes in with those workshops?
Yeah, so the question, have I ever heard of the Library Freedom Project? Not only have I heard of the Library Freedom Project, but Allison Macrina and I have like hung out because she lives a couple miles from me, and she gave my daughter stickers, which then ended up all over my house. Yeah, so the Library Freedom Project, for people who might not be aware of it, you should totally look it up, it's fab. Trains librarians on technologies that protect privacy, such as Tor, and trains librarians to train their patrons on that. Because privacy is a core value of libraries, and it's often not very well protected by our tools. You know, there's things tracking you all the time as you use the internet, including as you use your library resources, which is super uncool. Yeah, I haven't actually talked to Allison about incorporating a coding component. I think it's hard to do that in the context of a short workshop, because if people don't come in already having those skills, it's hard to show them how to use them in a way that is like productive in a specific domain. But now you have me wondering if I should ask her that. Huh. Yeah. Anyway, everyone should look up the Library Freedom Project. It's rad.
We actually had Alison talk at the seminar last year, and she was really interesting. And I have to admit, I changed over to DuckDuckGo as a search engine after that. And did a few other things, but yes, she was really interesting. So yes, it could be an interesting combination. Any more questions?
Yeah, I was just going to ask, Andromeda, what's the best way to get people excited and enthused about doing this? To a lot of people, it's the unknown. It's something that's a skill that they have heard about, but they are not ready to put their hand up for. And one of the things I'm the same. I'm a librarian. We're all librarians. We've got to get enthusiastic about this stuff. What's the key to getting everyone excited and letting them have the time and allowing them to do it? What's the key?
So, firstly, whoa, heard a giant echo. Hopefully you can mute on your end, because I'm slightly freaked out.
Do you need the question repeated, Andromeda?
No, I heard the question. I'm just hearing myself every time I talk.
Okay, yeah.
I think your mic is live and picking me up or something. Anyway, firstly, thank you. That's better. Much as I would love for everyone to be super enthused about it, honestly, it's okay if not everyone is. I think every library of sort of any size would be better off having some coding knowledge in-house, but that doesn't mean every librarian has to, right? If you look at all of the skills, it would be great for all of us to have. Like, none of us can have all of those skills. That said, how do you get people excited? I think it comes back to projects and mentors, right? The two things that excite me about code is, one, the like math major side of my brain is super like logical and problem solving, and it likes to find like complicated things and dig in and deconstruct them and like figure them out, because I hate it when I don't understand things. And then the like librarian teacher, like fuzzy, cheerful, enthusiastic side of my brain likes empowering people and making things work better in the world and adding capabilities that weren't there that let people do stuff that matters to them. And that's fundamentally what projects and mentors are about, right? Projects let you solve problems and maybe have an impact, and mentors and collaborators let you feel like warm and fuzzy and engaged. And I think most people are probably motivated by at least one of those things. If you are talking to people who are not motivated by either of those things, you might have other problems.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Okay, well, how about we join in thanking Andromeda? That was really fabulous, Andromeda. Thank you so much.
I'm really glad I got to sort of be in Australia. I'm very excited about that.
Yeah, hopefully we'll be able to really get you here sometime. But, you know, you did save a lot of flight time, and it's a long flight from where you live.
Yeah, I hear it's roughly a century.
Yeah. But it'd still be lovely to have you here sometime. So thank you very much, and lovely to see you.
Have a great conference, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Okay. Thanks, Ellen.
I'll stay here to do the screen.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Okay, so we've got a bit of fun now. We're going to have our 10 slides in 5 minutes. This is a short session. We're only having 3 people run these. First up is Neera Sani from Parramatta, and she's going to present 10 slides. Is it 10?
Yeah.
Okay. And then we've got 2 more after that. Okay, thank you, Neera.
So I'm just going to have to, the screen sharing isn't perfect. So we're going to go to screen share, then do this, share, then F5, and you kind of metaphorically hear me crossing my fingers at this point. You should be able to progress just by using that.
Perfect. Thank you so much. It's still a morning. Good morning, everyone. I'm just here to share some of the things which we are doing at Parramatta Heritage Centre, City of Parramatta. Last year I was here, and I was talking about how we have launched our new website and what we are doing and what we are adding. So I'm proud to say that it's working really well. with the help of IT, they help us in setting up the website, but it's thoroughly managed by our team. And what we have done is we do have family history, local history, and new arrivals, along with the photo collection and other things. To give you a little bit more information, if you click on local history, it gives you all the freely available website as well as what we have in the library in one place. So it's really good resource, and that's very heavily used. Next is family history. We do have subscription to Ancestry database, and apart from that, any other freely available databases, they are all listed there. So it's really, really good resource for the family historians. Apart from that, we are working on some projects, which they are listed on that side. How we come up with this idea is we do get quite a number of inquiries to our center. We get about 150 to 200 inquiries a month, which is over 1,500 inquiries in a year. And it is a lot of inquiries, and those inquiries are from within the council, from all the consultants, because there's a lot of development going on in Parramatta, from all the consultants, and of course from the public as well. And when we are dealing with those inquiries, majority of those inquiries are repeated. So what we thought that we can save some time for the staff, and we can formulate some system where we can have information ready for the patrons, for the council, and for all the inquirers, and we can send the link to them and they can work. So I'll just take two examples of one of the ones project which we have worked and we are still working on, Cumberland, history of Cumberland Hospital Precinct. And North Parramatta, there's heaps of development going, and people were interested in knowing the history of all the buildings which are there, their significance and all that stuff. So what we did was we have done an interactive map with the pins on that, and if you click on that, it gives you some information about those things. Apart from that, we had over 35 blog posts. So all the inquiries which we are getting from the council, from the public, from the consultants, we convert that into a blog post, and that is very well referenced. So it has all the resources which we have used. So anyone who is looking at that, they are not getting the information, but they are getting the resources as well. So they can always, if they want to know more about that, they can always go back and research that. By doing that, what happened was, if we have got the inquiry from the council, we send them the link and we ask them to come and visit us if they need more information. And same is with the public. What we have done is, before the Parramatta, North Parramatta precinct was going out, we looked at some of the areas like Female Factory, Cumberland Hospital. We did a lot of research, put out all those blog posts, and as and when more inquiries are coming in, we keep on doing research, responding to the inquiries, as well as converting them into blog posts. And this is really heavily used resource. Our library is not a very busy library, but our online presence is, people are using a lot of our websites and using the blogs and everything. And the second project which I'm talking about here is Parramatta Square. That included part of the Parramatta, which is old library, Darcy Street building, old council building, and some of the other areas. So what we did is, there is some construction going on at the moment, and we launched that about 6 months ago. We did research of all the areas around that, in that Parramatta Square, and did blog post and made it available for the council, consultants, and everyone. Apart from that, we do take pictures from time to time, and we make all these pictures available on our image gallery. And we have got about 5 GoPro cameras mounted on different areas, and we do have time-lapse videos as well. And it's every 2 to 3 days. It's just showing how the buildings are going down, what's the progress day and night. So it's really, really good. And it's really heavily liked by the community, as well as we are getting constant requests from Channel 9, Channel 7 to give the some of those footage which they are using it in their news as well. Okay, apart from that, what we have done is, I mean, why I'm sharing all this with you is because not only me, all of us, we do get heaps of inquiries where we are repeating the same answers time and again. If you guys want, I mean, it has worked really well for us. And if you guys want, you guys can go through that as well. Another really important thing was the Parramatta, the research guides, which we, just like all the other libraries, we had it as a printed format and they were available. But what we were noticing is people pick up all the research guides. When they are leaving the library, they go downstairs, we have visitor center as well, and they throw it in the bin. Which was a bit frustrating because I don't like killing the trees. So we came up with the idea. We thought, okay, let's make it available online. If somebody wants, they can take the hard copy, but they can go and access it online as well. So we keep on checking them every year, and we have 12 research guides available on our website. And now, because the lands department have made the 6 maps available, so we are working on another grid guides, which is really good. And by doing this, we do have some published ones available in the library, but people prefer to have use these ones more than anything else. So these are just to give you an idea that what sort of guides we have. That brings me to the end of my presentation. But if you have any questions, I know we don't have any time now to do that. But please feel free to reach out to me when I'm out there or drop me an email, and I'm happy to share my experience with you all.
Thank you, Sani. Thank you, Sani. That was a really great bit of news coming from Parramatta. I'm really impressed with that site. I know over at Campbelltown we did a fair bit of that sort of stuff at one stage, and I was kind of under the pump trying to do it, but you've done it beautifully. It looks really good how the local studies and family history is all together. Okay, so our next 10-minute speaker, 5-minute speaker, okay, is Catherine Joss from the City of Sydney. Welcome, Catherine.
Thank you. Okay, well, good morning, everyone. I think I'm only going to take 5 minutes, so it's a quick one. Some of you may have seen me speak at the reference seminars before, briefly on corporate library services in public libraries. So, as you know, well, today I'm going to be speaking actually about a new development in the corporate library service at City of Sydney, which is introducing programs, which is a bit of a challenge and a boundary breaking thing for me. So the main idea I want to get across today in this 5 minutes is just to understand that creative programming can enhance a corporate library service, which doesn't really make sense really when you think about it, but I'll share my experience of it today. I'll start talking a little bit about corporate libraries and then talk a bit about the program. So some public libraries in New South Wales do have staff working in corporate library services. Some are dedicated staff like I am, a couple of other libraries, Lane Cove and Manly, Sutherland and Penrith have librarians working in this role. Many of you will also, as reference librarians, work with council staff as the need arises. So part of your job, even though you may not think it, is a corporate library service. At the City of Sydney, I'm part-time, and I spend most of my time providing regular reference services to my client group, which is the council staff. So it might be joining staff up, sourcing material into library loans, managing databases. I manage Standards Online Premium and LawLex, which is a legal information service, that sort of thing. When staff have research projects, I'm a point of call where I can support them in special projects. I manage corporate library intranet page and so on. So that's what I have been doing up to now. And one of the reasons I really enjoy my role is that there's a solid component of reference work, and it's really satisfying to see the staff go on and use the library resources in their work as practitioners in local government. So that's something I enjoy about my position. So to the program, Lunchtime Makers is what it's called. Late last year, around the time of Mental Health Month, our library programming staff ran a series of creativity and mindfulness workshops in the branches, and they came to me and said, why don't we run one for council staff? And I thought, oh, okay, boundaries, but I said yes and thought I'd take on the challenge. And in planning the program, we thought about our business unit context, about the library mission, which is to be a place to grow, learn, create and connect. So I could see how it fit in with that. And also council's wider mental healthy workplace policy we have. So it sort of fit into that world. So I was comfortable that it had that context to sit within. Luckily for me, our collections and contracts team leader, Charlene Louie, is a bit of a crafting guru. So I partnered with her and we run the programs together. And the objective we established for the program was to encourage staff connectedness, to provide opportunities through creative expression and mindfulness, and to promote staff awareness of the library service. So in planning the program, we scheduled lunchtime events. So we booked our meeting room that we have at Town Hall House. We created a session management plan, which is booking sheets, how we manage the day, get someone to take photos, all that sort of thing. And we also had a communication plan. One of our days. To promote the programs within council, we placed material in our weekly staff newsletter, put posters in the lifts and tea rooms, and because we're in a 23-level building, we've got a fair bit of exercise going up and down and meeting people along the way, which has been good. We send calendar invites to some of our regular users, and we also post on our Yammer, which is like our internal social media platform. And as you see, there's a session on today for Library Week, and this is the first time we've asked people to come along and actually ask us questions about the library. So we're going to be interested to see if they do actually start having more direct conversation about library services. The program's run over a lunchtime period, so between 12 and 2. Staff drop in whenever they can over the lunch break, and the attendance has been quite good. We've been getting between 20 and 30 staff come in through the lunch break, and we get a mixture of males and females. It's not just a girls' club, so it's good. And there's been a lot happening. We've done Day of the Dead things, and Mother's Day cards, and Valentine's Day cards, so it's been really good. Thanks to Charlene with her crafting skills. It's been running for 9 months now, so we really are looking at thinking about doing some formal evaluation soon, so we'll probably do some sort of survey about how it's been going. We've received and prompted a lot of informal feedback from staff, and it seems that the program is meeting the mentally healthy workplace plan goals, and the objectives regarding the library service seem to be being met as well. I've had an increase in staff joining the library. We've had informal questions about library services, you know, do you have the economist, how can I access it, that sort of thing. So that's been really good. And when I've posted things in the staff newsletter about more referencey things like Law Lex, I had 30 new staff subscribe, which was great. I used to struggle a bit before, so maybe it's just the profile of the library is increasing. So the sessions have been well attended, and I think it's helping with visibility with the staff. So to summarise, I think it's been a positive addition to the corporate service. It's something I didn't imagine I would be doing this time last year, but we are. It's introduced me to a range of staff that I wouldn't have otherwise met, and it's meant that the library is seen as being proactive in contributing to the healthy workplace goals of the organisation, so taking part in the workplace and the organisational goals as well. So if anyone wants to learn a bit more about the corporate library service side of things, we have a module on RefX, and I think we'll be talking about RefX later in the day. So we have a module there. There's a group of us who get together a couple of times a year, and we have some information on the Reference Information Services Wiki, and we have a mailing list as well, and there's information there about how to sign up for that. And that's it from me.
Thanks, Catherine. Wow, that was really interesting. I'm sort of switched on. I'm thinking, heck, we can promote stuff to all those guys upstairs. How cool was that? Get them down there making something. I like that. That's good. Okay, now next speaker is Jennifer Wilson. She's going to talk about 23 research things.
Okay, hi everybody. Before I start off, can I just ask who remembers the 23 Things program? Who completed the 23 Things program? Standard. Who moved on to the 23 Mobile Things program? Well, today what I want to talk to you about is a new iteration of the program, which is 23 Research Data Things. So, this would have to be probably the nerdiest iteration of the program, but it's actually a really interesting program. A little bit of a recap for those who may not have participated in the 23 Things originally. It was a program that was developed by Helene Blowers from Charlotte-Mecklenburg Library. And it was a way to encourage librarians to adapt and learn Web 2.0 technologies. That sounds like such an old term already, yet that program really only began in 2006. So 10 years ago, all these things that we're taking for granted were brand new. The original format of the program required participants to take part in an 8.5-week course, and they kept up with the coursework by a series of weekly blog posts that described Web 2.0. And in that time, you had 23 assignments to complete. We learnt about blogging and photos and images online and wikis. And it's the first time we were introduced to things like collaborative authoring. This is where Google Docs emerged. So after we'd mastered that and we'd moved on to 23 Mobile Things, that's where the technology decided to come with us. Computers detached from the desks and followed us around. 23 Research Data Things. Now this is a program that's been developed by the Australian National Data Service, or ANDS. Now, the goal of the program is to introduce people to research data. So who or what is ANDS? The Australian National Data Service and this project is actually a collaboration between Monash University, the Australian National University, and CSIRO. It's funded by the federal government through the National Research Infrastructure for Australia program. So those are all the names and the terms. It gets easier after this. The aim is to make better use of our research output and to enable Australian researchers to more easily publish, discover and access data, and to enable new and more efficient research. The goal is that by making data more discoverable, they will enable the demonstration of research excellence and to build on existing data instead of recreating it. By reusing data, it allows people to verify the authenticity and correctness of the data. So, is anyone here from a library that's participated in GovHack? Or has anyone participated in those programs themselves? If you have, then you've already had an exposure to research data. And that's what this program is about, making it more accessible and a bit friendly and less scary than spreadsheets and data objects. The 23 Research Data Things is once again a self-directed learning program for anyone who wants to learn more about research. Participants will do roughly one thing a week, and there are breaks and catch-ups scheduled for most of 2016. Now, at the moment, we're actually on a break or a catch-up week. So we're up to about thing 10, which means we have 13 things to go. But the catch-up week is designed for everybody to take a breather, go back over the things that they might not have understood the first time, or to catch up, because they recognise that we are all pretty busy and we have lots of other things to do. Andromeda's introduced us all to the idea of coding and things we can fill in our spare time with. I'm here to throw another spoon into the mix. So for each thing, you will have the opportunity to read, watch, or do an activity. And then you're encouraged to post comments or questions to the 23 Things meetup site. Or across Australia, there are what are called community groups that have been set up. So if you're in an area where there are lots of people interested in this, a lot of libraries are hosting physical groups, so you can come and catch up and actually ask questions and discuss with people. There are also regular webinar catch-ups, so that if you want to sit at home at night in your pajamas and watch the webinar, that's good too. The things are revealed 1 week at a time, and they remain open from there on. So if you're interested in this and you want to have a look and start, the information remains on the ANDS website. With each of the 23 things, excuse me, you have a choice of 3 levels. So if you can see on the screen, it's using a traffic light system. The basic level is getting started. Basically, this stream 1 is the easier activities for people who are just getting to know what research data is and enter that world. Stream 2 is learn more. It's activities for people who have some knowledge of research data and who want to build on what they might already know. Stream 3 is challenge me, and this is for technical minded. Anne's described this as the stream for people who are keen to stretch themselves and to find out how data works under the hood. So if you always want to pull it apart, know how things work and how many pieces there are, that's the stream for you. If you're really ambitious, you have the choice to do all 3 streams. However, I'm finding just doing 1 is more than enough. Okay. So I'm not going to follow the links through, but they will be available in the presentation. We already have a really great example of how people are interacting with large data projects, and Trove is probably the best example of that, encouraging people to come in and interact with the data. The Virtual Astronomical Observatory is a similar program running worldwide for people who are interested in astronomy. The research data is made available, and people are encouraged to come in and to have a look at that data and interpret it. Basically, it's making a huge pool of data available that wouldn't otherwise have been looked at or classified by its owning organisation. This is the astronomical equivalent of Trove, and it's one of the big public research data projects. Another example of the project is and I always get this one wrong, but it's a protein data bank. This one is also making medical and biological data available for people and practitioners to look at. One of the really interesting things on this website is the main molecule of the month. If you wanted to know what the Zika virus looks like, that's it. It's all part of making science fun. Oops. Hang on, I've escaped. Okay. This is probably one of the less visually interesting sites to look at, but the Australian Data Archive has a huge amount of research data collected and made available for people to have a look at. Now, this isn't important just for librarians and people working with the data, but also for the people you have coming in looking for data, wanting to use data. This is made available free, and sometimes people have to register to access the data. But the whole point is that the data is being used for a purpose, and unexpected discoveries have meant some really interesting projects have come out of this. For example, in terms of some practical projects, on the Queensland Government website, there is a list of case studies that have been projects created out of accessing research and open data. One of those is the Brisbane Public Transport app. And there's also one about the safest way to walk to school in Brisbane. And all of that has come about through research data being made available, repackaged, coded into an app, and now you can plan the safest way between 2 points in Brisbane. Okay. If you don't want to read a whole lot of information about this project, there is a YouTube channel. There is a Twitter account if you want to follow the hashtag, which is 23RDthings, which people, because they are encouraged to comment as part of the program, there is some really interesting information and comments made available, and some very interesting questions get asked. There are no dumb questions with this, and there are some really interesting answers. Knowledge is the same reward? No. We all want to get credit for something that we've done. So one of the fun elements of this program is as you work through the 23 research data things and you complete each of the things, you get awarded a Credly badge. Okay, so there's a little element of competition here because we know that we all like to see who's doing the best. You can take your badges. At the moment, I've only got 3 that I've claimed. Need to do this catch-up week, but it gives you that sense of achievement, and you can take your Credly badge and compare it to other people. There are also, through which Andromeda mentioned, Meetup. There are online communities discussing this as well, so you can join a group either online or physically to talk about this. Now, I said we were up to week 10. Is it too late to start? No, it's not. As I said, this program is planned to run all through 2016. You can start at any point. You can't jump ahead. Once you've caught up, you have to go at the pace of everybody else. But we have 13 things remaining that will be released over the course of this year. So if you're interested in research data or just generally exploring what is available, and it's really interesting to know what subsets of data can be available for some of our customers, this is a really interesting and easy way to get into what is a very complex area. It's a great introduction to data, data repositories, and a whole new set of terminology for librarians moving forward. If you have any questions about the program, I'm happy to answer them at lunchtime, but I would recommend having a look at the ANDS website. It's really well put together, and it's been put together by librarians as well. So a lot of the questions that we would have already been answered for us. So thank you, everyone.
Okay. Thank you so much, Jennifer. That was really interesting. It's I remember doing the 23 things a few years ago, the first one, and